Hey guys, thanks for listening to Pastor with No Answers. Wanted to tell you about a quick blunder that I had in this episode. Go figure, I actually made a mistake. Oh my gosh. Anyway, at the end of the episode, I tell you to go pre-order my book, and I direct folks to fundamentalistpastor.org. It's actually fundamentalistpastor.com. Fundamentalistpastor.com. Hope you enjoy this episode with my old man. All right, this is the pastor.
And this is the pastor's older brother.
And this is Jared and Joey's father.
All right, so the silence has officially been broken. Everybody that's been dying to hear from Virgil Svendsen, they are getting their wish.
Oh, yeah.
Jared, I was telling Dad that we were thinking about some stories about him over the years, but I wanted to tell you that I'm sitting here setting up the computer, and Dad is busting out singing Don Francisco stuff. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do remember that.
Hey, but seriously, I was listening to the lyrics. That man was ahead of his time, man. I mean, I think he was hating the church before I was born.
Old school. Did you when he was singing the song, did you recognize it?
Oh, totally. I knew exactly what he was singing. Yeah.
Yeah,
I bet I probably would.
It's called a steeple song. Yeah, I don't care how steep your steeple is.
Yeah, I kind of think if I revisited Don Francisco, it would probably be something that I could listen to. You know what I'm saying? Just because he really was good for sure.
Right.
But at that younger age, when Mom and Dad were listening to him, I mean, I didn't know the difference between Don Francisco and Tammy Baker when it came to good music. I mean, I didn't know what was good and what wasn't. So,
could you listen to Carmen today?
No, I could not.
What's the other one? The real popular one that was like huge back in the day. The rock band.
Petra.
Petra. Could you listen to Petra today?
For sentimental value, yes. And
so strictly sentimental.
Well, some of their really old school stuff, like in the late 70s, early 80s, when they had, I think the lead singer was Greg X Volts. Like they definitely were keeping up with the really cool sound of the 70s for sure. So
I've never heard any of that stuff. So okay, I'll take your word for it.
You don't remember that song Judas Kiss? One Bad Pig did a remake of it.
Okay.
Anyway,
I think the only Petra I know is Petra Means Rock. We saw them in concert or whatever.
Yeah, totally. All right, so here's some Virgil Svendsen stories. Jared, do you remember being in the garage? We're minding our own business, and Kenny Bath is there, Andy Smith is there. We're playing G.I. Joes or something, and frantic Dad runs in the garage, doesn't say a word, but there is a look of panic on his face. He grabs a blanket and runs out of the garage full speed. So obviously all of us are just like, what in the world's going on?
Right.
We walk around the house, the daggum lawn is on fire. Like the whole yard is burning. Like if I had a visual of hell as a little kid, that's what
that was it.
And so obviously Kenny was a neighborhood kid that we all looked up to, and so he took off like he had baseball gloves or something. He started hitting the lawn, because Dad was trying to put it out with a blanket, and so we decided we were going to pitch in too. But so Dad, you were wanting to burn all the weeds, right?
I was trying to burn off the dead dry grass to promote healthy green grass.
Yeah.
But there was a little
on it.
No, there was a little bit of a breeze blowing, and so it kind of got out of control. I burned my whole daggum lawn.
So you were trying to start like multiple small fires in certain patches? Is that was the idea?
No, but it was supposed to be more controlled, and it just wasn't controlled. I was scared it was going to jump into the neighbors' lawns and all kind of stuff.
Sure.
So I was in a little bit of a panic.
Yeah, and so for the rest of that spring or summer, whenever it was, I mean, people would drive by our yard and it was black. It was we had the black front yard.
I do not have a green thumb. I'll just say that.
All right, so Jared, tell me. So here's the thing about Dad that I'm super proud of, and I'm glad that I got it from him is the long fuse. But what I wanted to ask you, Dad, is sometimes my closest friends, they think that I'm actually suppressing anger and kind of out of pride, like not react in anger, not raise my voice, but they think that I'm just suppressing that stuff. I'm like, well, you can think that. I'm just not. Like, things don't typically rattle me, but then when they do, I'm super rattled. Would you say like Jared and I, there's been so for our listeners' sake, Jared and I have seen Dad mad very few times, but those few times, it's like a war going on. Like, and if you
head for the hills,
if you shoot at that guy, like, just be prepared to be destroyed. So, would you say that, Dad, that's you're not suppressing stuff when you're not mad? You just don't get rattled.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, 99% of things that happen, if you get a little bit upset or a little bit angry, you're kind of like, is it really worth it to get mad? Let's just take another avenue.
Right.
I guess that was my philosophy. I just never thought that much good would come out of getting all angry and hot and getting in a big fight and argument.
Yeah. All right, Jared. So name a situation where the fuse was gone and it burned all the way through.
Well, first off, I do want to say that that's one thing I really am thankful for, because I think that that's one trait that got passed on to me as well as you about the long fuse. Like, I'm known in my school as being a teacher with a very long fuse, who's very chill, who's very relaxed, and I attribute all of that to Dad. So that's a really good thing for sure.
Totally.
Having said that, I remember, I guess, I don't know, was I 10, 11 maybe? We were having dinner at the table.
You're in high school for sure.
No way.
Yeah, I think you were.
Wow, I think
because you were in your funk, man. You were kind of in your asshole funk where you just were kind of jerky to people.
Let's say 8th or 9th grade then.
All right.
There's no way it was like junior or senior year. So we'll say 8th or 9th. So I'm probably 13 or 14, and we're having dinner. And I guess I don't really remember the exact details, but apparently, like Joey said, I was in some kind of pissed off mood. I was probably being very snarky, and I guess we were talking about something school-related or house-related, and I said something that was probably not the best thing to say to my mom. Don't really remember what it was. But I do remember that Dad lit up, and he's like, if you talk to Mom...
Wait, hold on a second. He took you outside. He took you out on the back patio porch. He said, Jared, step outside. You don't remember that?
Okay, then we're talking about two completely different stories.
Okay, you finish your story then. My bad.
So the story I'm talking about, again, I think I'm younger. Maybe you're talking about a story where I'm older.
Okay.
But I remember being at the table and Dad saying from across the table that if you talk to Mom like that again, I'm going to slap the shit out of you at the table.
Wow.
Right? And I think Joey's mouth probably dropped. I think Mom's mouth probably dropped, and I know my mouth dropped, and I know my heart sank.
I mean,
I do not remember that, but I believe you.
We weren't even allowed to say sucks in this house. And
right, exactly.
Like that was some Halver Svendsen coming out of him for sure.
And see, that's the thing too, because if Dad was the kind of dad that constantly did that would have very little effect.
Oh, yeah.
The fact that he never, ever talked like that, and he never, ever really blew his fuse, that was like hardcore.
Right.
Like, it shook me to the very foundation of my being. So, definitely.
So the time when you and I were both in high school, and we went to Christian skate night on a Monday night and pretty much disappeared.
Oh, I remember that.
They couldn't get in touch with us or anything. So what happens is, you don't know exactly, like, you can't necessarily, well, I don't know. You can look at Dad and kind of know where he's at, but it's not confirmed until he starts talking. So you could have laid back Dad that's not going to make a big deal out of things, or you could have you might as well just be quiet and just go with it. Because when we walked in the house, we had no idea that, people were calling. Mom and Dad were trying to find out where we were because we had our younger cousin with us. Parents were freaking out. We have disappeared. We're just hanging out at a friend's house. So we both walk into the house, or actually we pull up, we see the lights on, and we're like, oh gosh, okay, so they're up, and it's 1 o'clock.
So you and I really, we completely underestimated the situation.
Right,
I think.
Right,
I was not expecting anything.
Yeah, exactly. So we walk into the house. Mom and Dad are both up. Dad is sitting in their easy chair or something, and he basically says something along the lines of, okay, crap, we know we're in trouble. And I'm like, well, Jared's the one driving. He's in charge. Good night. I'll see you later. And Dad, how he responded, I was like, okay, I got you. The fuse has been burnt. I need to shut my mouth, listen to everything he says. Do not argue. Do not talk back. So, Jared, in the sixth grade, I went to the whole Barrier Island trip that you did too. Well, Dad volunteered to that they wanted parents to come in and spend the night in the barracks or whatever you call it, where we were sleeping. And Dad volunteered to do that for one night, and then that way he gets up in the morning, drives to work. But
right.
So this is an example of a time when I think Dad's fuse would have burnt all the way, but I think because there were other kids around, he probably knew I can't put my wrath out on everyone. So you know how middle schoolers are. I mean, they, in the middle of the night, they're just joking around. They're not going to sleep. We're crashing on each other, throwing things. And Dad walks into our room because he's like, in another room right by, but he can hear everything. And just imagine this, Jared. He just stands there and he says, guys, he said, I am begging you, please be quiet. He said, I've got to get up and go to work in the morning. He said, I cannot go to sleep. I'm just asking you, please be quiet. Like there was no telling us. There was no yelling. There was no shut up or I'm going to slap the shit out of all you middle school punks. It was like, please.
So what was the response? What was the response?
I think we quieted down because we were just like, man, he was so nice about it. We can't just say, and I mean, me, obviously, I did not, I wasn't loud after that point. I mean, that's my dad and he's asking us. So
that's the beauty of that tactic, because if Dad were to barge in and yell, he would be the asshole. Yeah. But he turns it around to where if you keep doing it, you're the asshole. So it works. It's awesome. For sure.
I was the asshole plenty enough times. So.
And then you have the classic, the part of your face above your upper lip, that little crease in the middle. That is functional to house the snot running down your nose. Like that is what it is for.
We're snot canal. Yeah, one thing I was thinking of too is this goes back to Dad's laid backside. Is I remember when we went to Cornerstone, so it was summer of 1991. I had just turned 16, and I had just gotten my driver's license. And on the way back from Illinois, Dad would let me drive for hours at a time, and he would be sleeping in the back seat. How many parents
in the back seat?
Yeah, you were in the front with me. We were blasting our music, and Dad was in the back sleeping.
I do not remember that.
Wow. I totally remember that. That's laid back.
Yeah. So how old were you? You would have been.
I just turned 16.
Okay,
just turned 16.
So that wasn't your driving permit though, but still, you were 16.
Right, because I had my license when I was 15, but you couldn't drive at night until you turned 16. So I had just turned 16.
Well, at that point, I remember I had a lot of trust in you, just the way you were for some reason. So I didn't have any reservations about that at all.
So speaking of Cornerstone, Dad, were there? So 1991. This is when all the hair metal bands were out. I mean, as far as the Christian punk scene, I mean, it was pretty much reduced to Crash Dog and One Bad Pig, which
Crucified.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I guess Crucified. Yeah, I always thought of them as like hardcore, but yeah, you're right, punk. So. Like, was there ever a time, I mean, we're talking, 15-hour drive, and then once we get there, we're sleeping in tents in the middle of the summer. Yeah. Like, so obviously you and Mom both wanted for us to take that trip. Mom stayed back. But was there ever a time when you were just like, I love my boys, but my gosh, what have I done?
No, never. No, I know something that was really important to you guys, and I was just going to make the best of it and just have fun. You know? And, I mean, the bathroom situation wasn't the best. It stunk really bad. I remember that, but hey, it was fun hanging out.
And then you definitely had a fun time with all the different hairstyles and stuff.
Oh,
you were even taking some pictures.
I remember I started to take a picture, and you guys grabbed the camera and said, "Dad, no, you can't do that." I mean, it was a big old mohawk.
Did you go to any shows? I don't remember. Did you go to any concert?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I went to a couple of shows.
Yeah, I think you would kind of pop in and look for 10 or 15 minutes to get the basic.
Just get the feel of it. Yeah, I would be kind of in the back just looking, and I saw some stage diving and the mosh pit.
Yeah,
I saw that.
But I do think there was one night, Jared, where he went to main stage when Whiteheart was playing, because I think maybe some of those tunes were a little familiar. So there were sometimes where he would take in the whole thing. Well, I'm promoting a book that's coming out probably in November. I'm not sure exactly when this episode is going to be released, but the book is Fundamentalist, and the website for pre-orders is fundamentalistpastor.com. And, really the objective of this episode is to talk to family, people that spent the most time with me, obviously childhood, high school, and all that. And some of these behaviors were starting to develop at this juncture in my life. And, I want to have an episode with my wife, an episode with, some college buddies. But today I want to get a feel for what you guys were seeing. Jared, I know my junior and senior year of high school, you were already at Furman, but what I want to do is just ask you guys if it, based on some of the stuff I share in this book, what were some of the things that y'all were seeing at an early stage in my life? So this book, I'm sharing, pretty embarrassing, irrational thoughts that I was plagued with, just crazy worries. Explain some stuff about my depression. I kind of address people that live with depressed people. I address people that struggle with depression. So, kind of cover all the bases. But Jared, outside of remembering me doing the light switch ritual, I mean, are there any other things that you reflect on in our childhood or times when we were going to high school together where you could tell something was off?
I don't know whether it's you were more subtle about it or I was so into myself.
Yeah.
But I don't remember. I remember you having down days for sure. And I remember you having girl trouble and that brought you down. And because I was experiencing so much of that too, I guess it didn't really hit me that you were going through so much. So I would have to say no, except for the typical down moments. And I did see you down. I just never gave too much thought to it, I guess.
Yeah.
And my question to you, Joey, do you think I was more obvious in my depression than you were? Because I think that at least it seemed to me like I was really obvious about it. Like I just shut myself in the room. You seem to be more social. You seem to be doing more things than I did.
Yeah. Well, I think for me is I quickly learned. This makes me sound a lot better than you, and I don't mean it this way. But first of all, I don't think I sunk as deep as you did. Like I think you could call it like a spike where you were way down. Where I think for me, it was pretty much a stable thing to where I just acclimated to being down all the time. But I think it's weird. It's like I didn't realize that there was a problem. So it's one thing to be depressed and not know that you're depressed. It's another thing to be depressed and know it, and so you're conscious of, wait, there's something wrong. Okay. I'm actually sad. I didn't know. Like I thought that there were spiritual stuff. I thought that it was all based on the fact that I wasn't trusting in God enough. I thought that I needed to say the sinner's prayer correctly and then everything would go away if I could just start trusting in God again. I mean, so there was never this, oh, I'm depressed, there's something wrong with my brain. And so I guess as far as it being, really noticeable, I don't know.
That makes a lot of sense because I think you're right. I think you, probably from an earlier age, were kind of experiencing it all the time, whereas for me, it was like 2 really, really bad years, and I was pretty much done.
Yeah.
So for me, it really was something different, and I didn't know how to deal with it, whereas you probably just became more of a functional depressed person.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I can see that. Like, Dad, do you remember, like, we joke around about this, but I believe now having known that I was struggling in some way, shape, or form, I look back on some of the stuff and I think, no, that was actually early signs of the sort of stuff that manifested itself in a way more extreme way, as I got older. But there's that one time when I told you that I would die for you.
I was thinking the same thing. I was shaving, and I don't know how old you were, but you came in there and you said, Dad, I love you so much, I would die for you. And then you walked away, and I thought, wow, what a sweet thing to say.
And it was totally sincere. Like, I just thought, I'll tell him
I could tell. So just a minute later or so, he came walking back in, and he said, you said, Dad, you know what I said about loving you so much I would die for you? I said, yeah. He says, well, I think I would.
Right.
And what that meant to me was that you were very conscious that you did not want to tell a lie or mislead, or that you started thinking about it, maybe obsessing over it a little bit. That's kind of what I thought, because I had gone through the same kinds of things. So that was very early on.
Right. Yeah. I mean, so what was going on in my mind exactly? I didn't want to lie because if I did, I would have felt guilty. And if you went on your about your life thinking, oh wow, my son would die for me, and it wasn't true, then I would just feel guilty. So I was just like, okay, I'm pretty sure it's true, but since I'm not positive, I need to make sure you know that I'm not positive. I mean, or else I would have no peace in my brain. So I mean, we're talking. I mean, I don't think I was a teenager. You know, I think
no,
I was
you weren't.
younger.
You were more like I want to say somewhere between 5 and 7, maybe.
Right. So that sort of thing were early signs. I mean, and then I believe that the times I would go to bed on a Sunday night knowing that school was the next day, it wasn't like I was terrified of school, but there was like this gnawing feeling of, wait a second, I don't want to be away from family. Like, and it wasn't a normal, oh, I'm bummed out about school sucks sort of thing. It was like a deeper pain of, I don't want to go away. Like, this is my family. Why would I want to be away from my family? Now, as an adult, I realize there's something a little off about that. You know, it's one thing to love your family. It's another thing to almost feel like school is the bad guy for taking me away from my family. So, Jared, any other thing in high school, or I kept it pretty secret?
Yeah, and again, I don't know how much of that was me just being obsessed with my own problems.
Yeah.
But you know what? I think you and I had a lot of good times in high school. Like it didn't really. Well, I think you handled it so well to where you were able to function at a normal level, at least for appearance's sake.
Yeah.
So I think you were a normal high schooler and that you were able to be social and have fun, but I guess you were harboring all that pain and were able to mask it really well.
Yeah.
Another thing that I remember when you were really young, Joey, and it may not have had anything to do with depression coming on, but when you were really little, you had a lot of hallucinations.
Yeah.
I definitely remember that.
You would wake up really freaking out. You were seeing things that were crazy, and a couple of times I had to kind of hold you down on the floor, and you were doing weird things like spitting in my face and stuff like that. And I was like, I was trying to be the calm one, but I was kind of like, I was a little bit concerned, but then after that, you'd be fine. And so I'm like, well, okay, that's just one of those things.
Yeah, it was pretty much when my fever would spike, that would happen.
Oh, the fever. Yeah.
So
exactly.
It coincided with a high fever, and I've seen the same thing with Rosa and Will.
Okay. So that was unrelated.
Yeah.
But it's like, it looks very much like demon possession.
Oh, totally. Totally.
Yeah,
well, I mean, the little bit that I remember of it, it's kind of scary to reflect on that, because I remember the spitting part. I remember hearing Dad say something like, we have to put something in his mouth. And so I was just like, oh, you're going to put something in my mouth? Then I'm going to spit a bunch before you can get it in my mouth.
Because I thought you might have been having an epileptic seizure. So you're supposed to put a stick.
Our listeners are like, how jacked is Joey Svendsen? We didn't even know about the hallucinations. Good
I got to say, that's probably the scariest thing of my childhood was seeing you hallucinate.
Yeah.
That was scary.
Yeah. It was so crazy because in my head, it was the most troubling danger that I had ever experienced in my mind ever. And that's what I see in William and Rosa too. And what's funny is that I don't know if you remember, but one of my hallucinations, you were the bad guy, and I could not separate the two. You were the one that I was fearful of, and that's happened with Rosa and William. They know I'm their dad, but when they're hallucinating, there's one time when William was petrified of me, looked into my eyes with like the most immense fear, and I'm like, son, this is your dad. And he was just bawling in Priscilla's arms. I mean, it's just such irrational thinking. But
I think I remember that with you. You thought I was the bad guy.
Yeah.
Another thing I remember, when you were closer to like a preteen, 12 or 13, going to First Assembly.
Yeah.
Right before church, a couple of hours before going to church, and you're getting dressed and prepared to go, you would go in the bathroom and just shut the door, and you were like in there for a long time.
Yeah.
And I think I knew you were going through something, but I thought it was like, you liked a girl at church and you were getting nervous and things like that. That's what I thought it was. Was that
so
it?
You remember that too, Jared?
Yeah, but I thought you were just like getting your hair all right with your gel and all that stuff.
No, I think what happened, if we're talking about the same thing, I think that one time I went, so the church is about a 20-minute drive, and there was one time when I got there and my stomach was shot, and I felt super sick, and I needed Dad to take me back. So Dad drives all the way back and then goes all the way back to drive himself back to church. And from that point on, I was like obsessed, nervous, and irrationally afraid of that happening to the point where my mind actually drove my stomach to have problems every single Sunday morning. So I was in there sitting on the toilet, like just wanting to get whatever out needed, whatever needed to come out, I wanted it out so I didn't have to come home again. And yeah, I think there was a lot of nervousness about a girl that I liked and all of that. But I legitimately felt like my stomach was messed up every single Sunday morning, which it seems like I had to have known. Wait a second, my stomach just isn't starting to hurt every Sunday morning. That doesn't make any sense, but that's what my mind was doing for sure.
That's understandable.
Do you remember, Dad, when I was dating a girl named Amy? And it was the summer after my sophomore year, so I just pretty much things were completely broken off with Jennifer and I. And since the two of us dated for so long, I was like, I need to get out there, date some girls. So I meet this girl, Amy, liked her a lot, personality great, thought she was pretty. And almost within a couple weeks, I started talking to you and Mom about why am I not falling in love? Like I would ask y'all, just like, this girl is awesome. I love her personality. We're spending a lot of time with each other, but I don't think I'm falling in love. And y'all would just look at me like, what are you talking about? Like, it doesn't matter. Just date her. Like, and which just shows my mind got so fixated in such an irrational way. Like I felt like I could not go on in the relationship unless I was going to start falling in love.
That's almost like legalism, sort of.
Yeah.
Kind of. Yeah.
Yeah, legalism, and I think a fear of leading her on, but still, a normal dude in college would have just been like, sweet, a pretty girl that I can hang out with. This is awesome.
Yeah, you'd figure, nothing's happening, so she's not the right one. I'll move on.
Right. Right. Yeah. And what ended up happening is I did lead her on too much, but what would happen is I would come home to Charleston, and I would miss her so badly when I was at Winthrop, and so I'd come home to Charleston, and then right when I was with her and maybe kiss her, hang out with her, I'd fall right back into, wait a second, I'm not going to fall in love with this girl. And so I would still have fun. We'd hang out, but then I'd go back to school, be like, man, I got to break up with her. But then the next day I'd be like, I miss her again. And it was just this extreme thing in my brain that I just could not fix until finally I realized the cycle and had to break it off. But just, even interacting with the opposite sex just was never a normal thing for me. Never. My mind always just went crazy. And that was ultimately how I came to a place where I realized that I had depression. I write about this in the book when Jared and Sarah, his wife, or fiance at the time, girlfriend at the time, they were trying to set me up with a blind date, and sure, I was excited about it. She was in Greenville, about an hour and a half drive. They said she's really awesome, pretty, great personality. I was like, oh, sweet, this will be fun. And so Jared calls me that Saturday and says, hey, didn't work out, sorry. And I get off the phone, and immediately I'm like, oh, no big deal. I didn't have hardly anything invested in this. I'll go back to my John Madden's football. But then I just plummeted, and there was something about it that just triggered just crazy darkness and depression. And that right there is when I was like, wait a second, Mom and Dad's right. Like, there's something not right here, because there's no way that I should be super depressed about this. And I called you guys immediately and pretty much just gave y'all yeah, you guys are right. What do I do from here? Because y'all had been telling me leading up to that, Joey, we think you struggle. You need to go to a doctor. You need to take medicine. But my response was always, nope, I'm not right spiritually. I need to fix things with God, and then I'll be okay. And that was such a horrible, dark, tumultuous cycle, because obviously the depression was the thing that was causing me not to have peace with God. So it was a never-ending cycle. Unless my depression was fixed, I was never going to feel right with God because of my irrational thinking. I always thought that he was against me.
Is that the girl you called Pocahontas?
Oh, no. That was a girl that totally led me on big time in college.
Okay.
Yeah. Amy was a girl that I dated for the whole summer I met her at a family bookstore in North Charleston.
Okay.
And
She has short blonde hair.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Now I remember her.
Yeah.
Well, see, what you're describing to me again is that thing that was in you where you could not accept not being truthful, not doing the right thing.
Right.
And you felt almost like if you did the wrong thing, you were somehow going to be condemned or suffer spiritual consequences. And, and that's kind of some of the same things I went through.
Yeah.
So I can see it.
Yeah. So, there's a whole chapter in the book called The Life Verse, and, kind of picking fun at that phrase, although we know what that means, and the life verses do bring us peace. We find a scripture in the Bible that gives us peace, and, run with it. But this is kind of satire, because my life verse plagued me, and that was where James says, hey, if you know the right things to do, but you don't do it, it's sin. So for me, how I got that in my head was, if there was any way that I could make things right and I didn't make things right, I was walking in condemnation and would go to hell for sure if I died. And so it would turn into things where I was just like, if I try to fix this, people are going to think I'm insane. Like, Jared, when I worked with Terry Smoke, I was carrying glass shelves, and I accidentally chipped a piece of the glass shelf off. I think some of these glass shelves were probably going to be thrown away, but that whole day I'm thinking, I need to tell him. I broke one of his shelves. I chipped off a piece of glass, and the whole day went by, and I didn't. And so the next day, I thought, man, I got to call him and tell him. But then I let weeks go by. Then I let months go by. And next thing I know, I'm like, if I call this guy and tell him I chipped a piece of his glass off when we moved 6 months ago, he'd be like, dude, I don't care. But I was like, either I do that or I go to hell. And I mean, so it was just like, I don't know what to do. I don't want to have that crazy conversation. And so in the book, I explained some situations where I actually did that very awkward conversation. One of them involved sending someone a letter in the mail. I mean, just craziness where that person is like, what in the heck is this guy even thinking? But to me, it was like, do or die. I mean, what am I going to be embarrassed now and go to heaven, or not be embarrassed and burn in hell forever? I mean, that's an easy choice.
Things. One of my biggest struggles was that whole thing about condemnation. Was I going to go to hell? Was I going to go to heaven? I always felt like I had about a 50-50 chance.
Yeah.
And I mean, that could be a whole 10 hours of talking about that.
Yeah.
How crazy that was. But,
yeah.
So how much do you attribute that to just the wiring of your brain versus how you were brought up?
Well, both.
Nature versus nurture.
I was so susceptible to that because I was brought up in Catholicism, and I love Catholics, but there's a lot of legalism and things in there. Basically, I always felt like God was over me with a club waiting for me to mess up, and he'd hit me, But then, so the way my brain was wired, man, I was, for depression, that just magnified it. And I mean, I could tell so many stories of doing some of the same things that Joey's talking about. I'll just say one, which will show you how messed up I was.
Yeah.
I was taking you and Jared to church, to Folly Beach, and I told Mom I was going to leave early. I don't know why I told her I was going to leave early, but a couple of weeks before that, most people that know me know that I'm an antique bottle collector, and I dig privies downtown to find old bottles. Well, there's one place I didn't have permission.
By privies, you mean where people pooped in?
Yeah, old outhouses. Yeah, old outhouses where people poop, and now there's nothing in there but
the trash they threw
organic
away.
Material. Now you got glass artifacts. But anyway, to make a long story short, I dug on the outside fence of this guy's property, tunneled underneath, and found a bunch of pretty good bottles. And so then I started feeling guilty about it. And I struggled, and I said, okay, I'm going to take these back. And I'm not going to go to knock on the guy's door and say, hey, I took these, but I'm going to set them on the fence, just on top of the fence. And I figured that I would have done my duty to make it correct. So I took you and Jared with me. I locked the car. Y'all were in there. I don't know if you were 5 and 3 or 4 and 2 or what, but you were about 30 yards away. And I did that, came back, got in the car, then went on to church down at Folly Beach. But that was nuts.
Right.
But I struggled over things like that, and I would write things down. And go to the Bible and read verses, and I was still struggling with all of that because I had just been kind of keyed in about the Bible and trying to sift Catholicism with the Bible and try to make sense out of it all. And I finally started realizing, hey, I gotta rewire myself with the truth in the Bible and not go by what one church denomination says. And that was a long struggle.
Yeah. And I remember you, I think if I remember correctly, because you told me this after the fact, but I think Jared and I were playing a video game and something happened while we were playing the video game and you said, Holy Ghost. Yeah. And then you were like, oh, great, I just blasphemed the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
Game over.
I thought I was going to hell for about 10 years.
Good Lord.
But I kept finding verses in the Bible that would say that you are forgiven and on and on. I could go on and on, but there was always that one verse that I was taking out of context and blaspheming the Holy Ghost. And I said, well, that's what I did.
Right.
And I just could not get over that.
Yeah.
See, I hate laughing because I know how real that was for you at the time. Mm-hmm. But for somebody like me who doesn't have those same struggles, that's ludicrous.
I know it's ludicrous. It's hilarious, but it caused me such great pain.
Right.
I did grow through that, and my faith became stronger. But in the midst, I just felt a lot of times I felt guilty that I was struggling with this, messing up my life, probably messing up my kids' life, making my wife miserable. But I sort of just struggled through that and kept a normal life going while at the same time reading the Bible, learning, reading, trying to make sense out of it all. And I finally did, but
you guys, go ahead, Jared.
I was gonna say, so I guess the connection with Catholicism would it be the fact that you felt like you had to repent to a priest every time you made a mistake like that, or was it more to it than that?
Well, let's see. That's a good question.
And I would ask Joey the same question because I know Joey, not coming up as a Catholic so much, more as a fundamentalist, Pentecostal or whatever. I'm sure there was a degree of, from their theology that was also affecting Joey in an adverse way. And I was just wondering, what the connections were with that as well.
But what I got, while I have the thought in my mind, let me go ahead and get out what I was going to talk about. This goes back to still being in the Catholic Church. I'd made my first Holy Communion. That's about age 7. And I was taught that one of the greatest sacrileges you can, and I didn't even know what sacrilege meant, but at the time it was taught like that meant you were going to hell. Well, I went up there for communion, and I was probably 7 or 8 or something like that. And the host that they put in your mouth went on my tongue, but then it fell on the floor. And I just panicked, and I went back to my seat, and I was just petrified that I had dropped the Lord's flesh and blood on the floor, which was holy.
Yeah.
And people were trampling all over it and all of that stuff. And for the longest time, it didn't last as long because I was so young, and you're sort of bendable and pliable. You get over things a little quicker. I got over that, but for a while, I thought I was going to hell. So it was just a common theme in my life that I wanted to do good, but it was almost impossible. You're bound to mess up and do things, and it just got to be an obsession.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you guys may be surprised that when I was writing this book, listen to what I ran into. Like I thought that the stuff that I went through and the stuff that Dad's describing that he went through, a lot of similarities there. I just thought it was a unique struggle mixed with, depression, religion. But I mean, there's actually a scientific term for it. It's called scrupulosity. And it is characterized by pathological guilt about moral or religious issues. It is personally distressing, objectively dysfunctional, and often accompanied by significant impairment in social functioning.
Wow.
So, and if you read the account, it is the rarest form of OCD. But if you read the accounts of people that suffered from that, I mean, it's like you're reading your own story. And
exactly.
So it's crazy because you're like, wait, I thought I was the only weirdo psychopath that thought this stuff, and there's other people that struggle with the same sort of thing,
Yeah.
I thought it was like, oh, it's just me and my old man. We're the ones with the crazy thoughts.
And then I read about people who are in a mental institution because of thinking they blaspheme the Holy Ghost.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was just nuts.
Yeah. So taking it kind of a deeper, what Jared just asked, Dad, how do you think we were affected as a family by fundamentalism and legalism at the churches that we went to. So I'm not here to bash the churches that Jared and I grew up in, but I went to this church literally from the time I was 8 years old to 16. So Jared from 10 all the way to going off to college. That's eventually what drove us away from that church was the legalistic teachings. But being there for 8 years, that had to have affected us.
Yeah. I feel like it affected you guys, but I think what I thought was affecting you more was the way I was dealing with what I was going through. But see, we left the Catholic Church 85 or 86.
Yeah, I was in third grade.
And so I was struggling through these things, and we were already at that time. Then after we left the Catholic Church, we were looking at other churches. So I was starting to get away from that, and I felt like maybe a lot of good was being done because I had gone through all this junk and was struggling with it and making positive, although slow, albeit slow, I was making progress towards processing all the stuff and reading the Bible and getting the truth. So I felt like I was helping you because I had gone through all this. And now then you were going through it. I didn't know all the details, but I said, certainly Joey's going through some depression issues I felt like from pre-teen through college.
Yeah.
And so I thought, dear God, I did go through some bad stuff, but at least, even if I messed him up a little bit, by me going through that, I am really able to help Joey and Jared through a lot of this stuff. So I guess that was, to me, it was a mixed blessing.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, if I had to describe, the church that we grew up in, it was like it was just messed up in the way of they taught grace, but it wasn't grace with strings attached. It was grace with like boulders attached. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
It was like, here's grace, it's free, accept Christ, you go to heaven. But if you mess up in the slightest way, you're done for.
You're exactly right. Yeah. It just gave you impossible things to achieve. It was almost impossible.
Yeah. Yeah, Jared, you said you think some of your social anxiety was brought on by Robert Pilgrim.
Oh, well, no, I mean, my social anxiety flared up.
Yeah.
When I was around that chaos, for sure. Good Lord. That was some scary stuff.
He would have made the best hardcore lead vocalist.
Like I said earlier, like I think that some of the scariest moments were when you hallucinated. That was like my early years. I would say my teen years, Robert Pilgrim.
Yeah.
That was scary, dude. Like if you just just happened to try out our church on a night that he was there, you would probably abandon Christianity.
Absolutely. Oh gosh. Jared, after knowing that you have gone through social anxiety, I now look back and believe that at least some percentage of what I was going through was partial social anxiety because I remember back in my teenage years and stuff, I just felt so socially inept and awkward, and that also contributed, along with the depression, to a lot of my problems. Yeah. So totally. I just had a nice, good sampling of everything, I think.
Wait, so you're saying you had not only depression, but you also had social anxiety?
Yeah.
See, like that sucks because like Joey's got like the depression going. I have the social anxiety, but you had both.
Yeah,
and kidney stones.
And back then, when I was going through this stuff,
trifecta.
Yeah, it's kidney stones. But people didn't talk about this stuff. You didn't even mention depression and all this stuff. I did hear the term nervous breakdown, so I kind of had some awareness of people just go bonkers and hardly ever recover. So that was another fear that entered into it. Oh my gosh, I'm having a nervous breakdown. I'm never going to be the same again. So yeah, I had it all.
Totally. Well, in this book, we the objective of this book is to be able to talk about this stuff in a lighthearted way, and at the same time, it's not just a book of jokes. I mean, I do believe there's purpose in this book, but if that purpose is for people to feel less alone just by reading my craziness, then I'm okay with that. I think there'll be a deeper level of learning for some people that want to read it that way. But does it bother you two in any way, given that I'm one dude that you guys, I'm at least on your top 5 of people that you love the most. So does it bother y'all that I'm going public with stuff that are super embarrassing? Or y'all just like, man, don't do that to yourself?
Not me at all. I think 100% it helps people. So that's part of what it's all about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say not only that, but it's also your life to live. So you do what you feel like.
That's
is
true
right.
too. Yeah.
Yeah. So with that being said, I have a whole chapter on the plaguing of my penis. So I won't go into all the details, but I described it on the Bad Christian podcast, and just how I was petrified that I did not have normal growth. And I go into a time where, Jared, I don't know if you know about this or not, and some of these stories I don't want to give completely away. Then it just takes the purpose of buying the book, and obviously I want to make millions of dollars off this thing. So,
Nice.
but Jared, I actually was so scared in college because I had seen something in a biology textbook, and it was some sort of hormone deficiency that male or females can have, and if the male has it, they're stuck with a small penis, breasts, and all that. And I seriously was like, "Oh gosh, that's me." And I actually sent mom and dad like a letter explaining it to them. Like, if your mom and dad, they had to have been like, "Holy gosh, like what in the world is going on right now?"
Right.
But what I want to do is fast forward to a couple months before I get married. I take dad into the what was the living room, so it was separated from the room where mom was at, and I basically showed dad my penis. Do you remember that?
I remember that.
Like, so
Scarred for life for that.
Gosh, I love how Toby talks about this. He's just like, could you imagine dad going to work the next day, fellas? You're not going to believe this shit. Like, damn it, my son showed me his penis. Like I wanted to see that.
No, the way I really felt was, I saw him dropping his pants, and I, didn't know what to expect. But I was like, well, this is different. But I really felt like, this is kind of cool. My son is comfortable enough to go ask these questions to me, and I got serious real quick. I went from, is this a joke, to because sometimes Joey does clown around.
That'd be the joke of all jokes. Dad, check this out.
But then when I knew he was serious and really was plagued by a fear about this, I was really happy that he was coming to me. That's what dads are supposed to do. Take crazy questions.
Check penises.
But anyway, I think we got a little closer at that point, and so that was a good thing. But yeah, that was wild. Never forget that.
So that did you have the discernment to directly relate that to my mental illness, or at the time did you just think, no, he's probably hasn't seen a whole lot of penises in his life, so he doesn't know the size of his?
No, I didn't attribute that to any of the other stuff. I just felt like it was kind of almost normal because, like you say, you never were able to compare. And I was just able to set your mind at ease and say, yeah, come on, man, you're totally normal. So, don't even worry about it anymore.
Yep.
That's all I thought.
Yeah. Jared, if you're a little jealous, I'm sure dad will check yours out when you're in. So
that would be even worse.
I don't want there to be
40-year-old man.
All right. Well, that's everybody just wanted to hear Dad's take on the penis story. So everybody's done with this episode. But I want to give you guys a chance to say anything that maybe you wanted to say. Just wrap this thing up. Do y'all have anything you want to add to the conversation?
Yeah, I'll just say that in my experience when I was younger, and I just started feeling like I could never be really, something was missing. I never could really be happy. And I'm sure that was a depression, but I didn't know anything about that. And so I would begin to rationalize and say, well, once I get out of high school and start getting my life kind of together, I'll be better. And then I went to college, and I said, I still didn't feel very happy. And I was like, okay, well, once I graduate from college and I'll have that over with, that struggle, then maybe I'll feel happy and I'll feel better. And so then, I had to go to Vietnam and serve over there for being an ROTC. I was like, okay, well, when I come back from there, I'm going to get married to my sweetheart, Barbara, and then everything will be great. So that didn't happen. But 2 years later is when I came down with my first big bout of major depression. So that was just kind of a quick synopsis of my life.
So you don't look back on your childhood and high school years and see anything different. Like you would say you started struggling with depression when you were an adult. Like that's when it started happening.
Yeah, I think
you didn't grow up with the greatest dad. I mean, we all know that. We love him, but
yeah, that's the only thing I was going to add was that I struggled with having a lot of fear that I was going to mess up all the time because it didn't take much to set my father off. And not that he hit me a lot. He only hit me once. But I never got any kind of positive reinforcement, I felt like. It was always, you can't do this. You didn't do that. Look how you messed this thing up. So I just never thought I could be, I could never please my dad in a lot of ways. But it was more of a fear of reprisal, fear of him going to do something and yell at me and spank me. And so I think that was the only thing is childhood that I remember that could have messed me up a little bit.
Yeah. Which I definitely think that it's because you lived it and because you just kept going on with your life. I think that is probably easy to underscore. Like, I think that probably impacted you way more than you even realize it.
Probably so. I do know the main thing was my chemical imbalance, but that definitely was an impact. It just, with that added into the mix, it was just like the perfect storm coming, you might say.
Yeah. So how would you describe your current struggles, Dad, with chemical imbalance, like at this stage in your life?
Well, at this stage of my life, I have a lot of experience with it going back. And just as recently as 2009, the medication that I was on just totally quit working. So I went into a major depression until I could get back on another medication that got me balanced again. And it took at least 2, maybe 3 tries to get the right one to get me back on. But when I'm on my meds, I think I live a pretty darn normal life. I still feel it. I mean, I know that if I didn't have this medication working for me, helping me, I would be a mess.
Yeah.
But I always stress, and I've always stressed to the kids, and I even think Joey might have come up with this, but he said, you know what, without God's healing and the medication, it would just be like eating dirt.
Yeah.
And that was kind of signified by the scripture where Jesus took spit and dirt and made mud and rubbed it on the guy's eyes.
Yeah.
He could see. He didn't have to do that. He could have just said, see, and he would have seen. But I think maybe he saw this coming thousands of years later, that people might struggle with, oh man, I can't use chemicals to help me out because I should just be healed, spiritually.
Yeah.
But he used mud and didn't have to, but he did. So I think that leaves it open for people to use medication and not feel bad about it.
Yeah. Jesus, the first pharmacist, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we have set up, so we've got a couple of websites to tell you guys about. We have fundamentalistpastor.org to go ahead and pre-order the book so you could hear more in depth of the stories that you heard here and also a lot more stories. And we also have, you have to be 18 or older, but we have penischecker.com. So hey, you send in a picture if you're feeling a little unsure, and my dad, he will give you the okay.